And well, thanks you guys for joining us today on this really super important topic. And we are so excited. If you haven't heard about the VTIDES program, you are going to learn everything you wanted to know about it and then some today. And I am so excited that Garnetta and Peg are joining us today. As I said, they really need no introduction. They are just forces of nature in this profession. They're incredible. And they are, kind of the two brainchilds behind this amazing program. So without further ado, I will hand it off to you guys.
Hello.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate all of you attending today. We're hoping this really can push the program out and have more people take advantage of the opportunity it provides.
Welcome, everyone. It's good to see some familiar names in the chat. So Peg and I are super excited to talk with you about this new program. It's been a couple years in getting it off the ground, but it's up and off the ground now. And we wanted to talk about how this program is a tool to help you meet some of the benchmarks that that CVTA is holding you to, as well as to help improve the experience and environment for students in your program who may be members of an underrepresented group. So for those, I'll introduce myself and I'll throw it back to Peg to introduce herself. For those who don't know me, my name is Garnetta Santiago, and I am a proud New York State licensed veterinary technician. This is my 21st year as an LVT. So I went to tech school when I was 2. I am senior manager of academic and professional affairs for Zoetis. And so a large part of what I do with Zoetis and what I've done when I originally joined Zoetis was to expand our resources to the veterinary technician and veterinary technician education community. Lots of resources headed towards vet schools and veterinarians. And I said, wait a minute, they can't do their job without us. And so you need to show some love in that space. And so VTIDES is one manifestation of how I've spread Zoetis resources to the vet tech education community. And we'll get into the program after Peg introduces herself.
So yeah, thank you again to all of you for joining us. I'm not even going to tell you how long I've been a licensed veterinary technician. I am a licensed veterinary technician, worked in Maine, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Mass, some of the Western states in practice, and moved into industry. I worked for IDEXX for a little while. I've been teaching in the veterinary technology space for 30 years. I started when I was 2 as well. And I moved to Rare Breed because they did offer me the opportunity to engage in work that would make veterinary technician careers more sustainable. I have personal stress about how many of our graduates are short-lived in the profession. It really bothers me. So Rare Breed has offered me this opportunity, and I'm really excited about the authentic support that they provide for DEI work. And that they allow me to spend so much time sort of out in the field, talking to students, veterinary technology programs about this program, and in general about the importance for us supporting underrepresented populations in our field. We are, as we all know, in a critical shortage. And if we don't do this work, we're going to continue to have some shortages, and we're going to continue to see practices closing because they can't find team members. So thank you. And I thank Garnetta. Garnetta has been an amazing, wonderful mentor for me. I would not be doing this if it weren't for the support that she's given me. So thanks.
It's mutual. All right, so let's talk about what VTIDES is. It's amazing, all this time in veterinary medicine, and one thing that you will never forget is how many acronyms they are. So VTIDES stands for Veterinary Technician Inclusivity, Diversity, Equity, Support, and Belonging. And really, it really benefits us, not just as the education level, but as a industry, as a profession wide. It's a tool to help prepare veterinary technicians to be more inclusive, to be more representative of the population that they're going to be serving. There are a lot of initiatives out there to increase DEI in veterinary medicine, but very few of them are targeted to veterinary technicians. And so this is a tool that we developed a couple years ago to help you at the academic level, help to integrate some of these tools into your programs. So I'll let Peg talk about the need.
Yeah, so I was a program director for a program that I built here in Maine. And in the early days of the directives from the CVTEA to include DEI, but not only from them, but from national college accreditors for all programs in higher education. And it's a challenge. So the directives that I was hearing, and I'm sure many of you are hearing, is, hey, you need to document for us where you're including the teaching of DEI in your program. And personally, that made no sense to me. This isn't something that you can teach in one course and then be like, done. I mean, we really need to integrate this authentically into the experience of our students, because we also want them to carry it forward. We want them to go into practices understanding the importance of welcoming people and not seeing it just as something that they were taught and learned about, but rather that they understand how to implement it. So that's the need. The need comes from both places, both the issue of we are in a shortage, we need to welcome more people. I think it's Blend that puts out a sticker that I love that says everybody belongs in vet med. When I carry those with me when I'm speaking to students, they go before rare breed stickers go, which is really interesting to me. It shows the hunger for this topic being covered by students and by educators as well. So both issues matter. The issue of addressing the need, but also addressing that you all are being held to the standard, and we want to give you an authentic way to address the requirements of the CVTEA rather than just trying to check a box somewhere. So yeah, these are the policies. Garnetta, do you want to go through this part?
No, actually, I want to go through the next one because I think that's a better sort of spend of our time.
Yes.
So we reached out to the CVTEA to get better clarification on exactly what sorts of criteria they look at when they're assessing this. So when they're asking you to show proof that you've demonstrated this, what exactly does that mean? Was it a movie night? You know, did you talk about it in half of a session, a class session? What exactly does that mean? We wanted more granularity around what they're looking for so that we can better position VTIDES to help support you, help you reach those benchmarks. So a couple of these things, I mean, there's an exhaustive list under 8E and 10A in their document, but we wanted to draw a highlight of a couple of these, primarily because they almost line up synergistically with what VTIDES is intended to do. The evidence of assessment to barriers to the recruitment and admissions of diverse populations, we don't see how that comes down to the programmatic level. That sounds more like an institutional an institutional gauge. That's not something that programs typically do. Typically, your institutions, your colleges look at that information. But evidence of curricular or co-curricular elements that allow students to develop an understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and where they intersect with veterinary medicine is precisely sort of the sweet spot for VTIDES. It's designed to help your students and your faculty sort of expand beyond the classroom, to have these sort of extracurricular or extra outside of the classroom types of experiences, because to Peg's point, teaching and helping them expand their understanding of cultural competency and DEI is not a one and done. It's not something that you teach in one class and then we're on to the next one. It really is kind of like anatomy and physiology. You teach it in the very beginning, and then you touch on it every single place you go. And with veterinary technicians being the primary communicators, once we get into practice, this is going to be an important skill set to have.
Barnetta, can you back up a second? I just want to make a note about the evidence of assessment to barriers. One note about that, I know it's really more of a college level or administrative level, college administrative level assessment. However, I do think program directors have to provide input into this. And I think that it helps to really focus on that when you're considering how you're going to address your DEI work. When I talk to students at colleges, a lot of the conversations that we have are things that people don't really think about. I mean, we go in with a focus that is depending on our own experience, right? I go in looking at the cultural diversity, but we also need to look at how many men are there, and how many people who are non-traditional students are there, and what are the different barriers. And I think once you really start to focus on that, even through doing these events, it really helps you provide that feedback to your administration to encourage them. I think it's important that we encourage the administration to take this seriously, and that brings more resources to the program when we do. Thanks, Granetta.
Yeah, I also think it sort of opens the aperture of what exactly DEI is. I
Yeah.
think traditionally it's been framed in a cultural context, so it's Black or white or Asian or Native American or U.S. citizen or non-U.S. citizen. It's been sort of a very narrow focus, and in having these conversations with disparate groups of students, we realize there are levels of DEI that are not always obvious. I can't look at someone and determine there's a neurodiverse issue, or they have neurodiverse barriers to the way they learn. And so being able to sort of expand our idea and our framework of DEI is going to be important. I too have had conversations with faculty members who say, I'll just teach it in my intro class. And who's to say they're equipped to teach that in their intro class? So VTIDES is designed to be not just sort of something that's administered by faculty, but it is heavily involved. There's a heavy component of student involvement. We want these students to be able to shape what these activities are going to be, because they're seeing the world differently. They're seeing it from a different lens. So that's what we wanted to do. Okay. So the benefit of it is that it gives you a tool to sort of frame out how to do this. I think one of the biggest challenges for faculty is, in addition to the 2,000 other things you have to do in one day, it's like, oh, now I have to come up with something for this. I have to figure this out. VTIDES is designed to provide resources primarily through the funnel of a grant for you to engage with your students and have them work alongside with faculty, but to have them to build it out. Have these students look at the community around them, whether that community exists solely on the campus level, or if they're talking about their larger community and where the area where the school is located or program is located, and assess what a need is and how best to do it. And I don't know, maybe it's because of my age. I just think that everyone younger than me is way more creative than I am. And they come up with amazing ideas for how to reach groups that traditionally go underserved. And research and so much research and data has shown that when we have an unrepresentative profession, so people from underrepresented groups are less likely to seek veterinary care. It's not just about expanding our students' understanding of DEI or understanding of inclusivity, but it's also there are direct implications for patient care, which is why we got into this in the first place. So again, to increase student engagement and then expand awareness of the sensitivities around students is one of the primary outcomes of VTIDES.
To that point, Garnetta, NAVTE has just completed their DEIB survey of their members, and I'm on their committee, and we're working on the report now, and that should be out hopefully relatively soon, with mid-year.
Yeah, DEI, we think about, I'm really curious to see the feedback from that, but one of the other things I think is important to remember is that culture, veterinary medicine as a culture, the veterinary industry as a culture, it can be very toxic in certain areas. There are a bunch of different things that sort of contribute to veterinary culture. And this is one component of it. When we look at, AHA just released their retention study, and we look at some of the causes that are directly related to the attrition in this profession. They're coming in droves and they're leaving in droves. I met a second-year veterinary student who told me he plans to specialize in emergency medicine, and he's already working on his second career plan because he knows he expects to leave the profession within 5 years. He was only in his second year of vet school, and he's preparing to leave. So when we think about all the things that sort of contribute to toxic culture and the high attrition rate in our profession, while DEI was not identified specifically as a driver, culture was identified as a driver, and this feeds into it. So there are benefits beyond just sort of the one-on-one interactions that students are going to be having. It's also, for the longevity and sort of the larger picture for our profession. We have multiple opportunities to support this. I will say with a caveat, this information was accurate as of July last year, so this has changed a little bit. But for the most part, there hasn't been much deviation in terms of the rate of growth for this profession, the number of technicians, and then that 220 accredited programs, with the asterisk is because 4 are awaiting accreditation. So we have an opportunity potentially to impact 35,000 future members of this profession.
Should we note, though, I'm not sure we have it in here, at the AVTE conference last year, the AVMA announced that through the academic year previous academic year, not the one we're currently in, there was a 10% decline in the number of veterinary technology students, which does not match the increase in the number of DVM students. And I know as a member of corporate, veterinary corporate, we're seeing practices close because they can't find veterinary technicians. And that's not just the corporation I work for, that is other corporate entities have had, and private practices have closed for that reason as well.
Yeah, this number was 31,000 prior to the start of this presentation. So yeah, there's definitely a drop, or actually 37,000 is a drop. So the CVTA, some of you may have participated in this. They did that mega traditional program director survey. This was the only data that I could find, or I should say the most complete data that I could find on the demographics, the ethnic demographics of students enrolled in vet tech programs in the United States. Tons of information on veterinary students, nothing on vet tech students. And so, this is, a span of 3 academic years, and you can see the trends, but, for Caucasian students, African-American, that sort of thing. And so we are starting to see incremental increases in some groups, in the people who identify as Hispanic, incremental increases in students who identify as Asian, those sorts of things. But the disparity between non-white students and white students is still a significant issue. It's something that we have to address. And so this is, I think that this information is important because when we talk about who we're trying to expand an understanding of cultural competency to, how we can do this, we have a huge opportunity to sort of, to expand that, have an expansion among our Caucasian students of their awareness and their understanding.
Yeah, and when Garnett and I were putting this together and looking at those numbers, we realized that there are some groups that aren't included in that and aren't being counted. I don't know if that's changing. We'll have to see, but that list doesn't address our LGBTQIA+ group, our neurodiverse students, or differently abled. And one of the ones I hear most about are hearing disabled students right now. We need them, and there are places where they're very successful, but there are a lot of programs that won't allow them to participate because of the nature of the AVMA functional requirements.
That's awesome.
So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the experiences of underrepresented students. And I've shown this slide in a lot of different presentations because I think it's I think it's really important to sort of bring some of these concepts to life. We can talk about DEI and what is bias and what is microaggression in really kind of academic ways. I think it's important to bring to mind or to bring to life some of these experiences. So before I joined Zoetis 6.5 years ago, I worked for 9 years for Hill's Pet Nutrition. And one of the experiences that has stayed with me in all these years was I was at a school in Pittsburgh. So we're in a major US city. And this school is located in downtown Pittsburgh, so a metropolis. And I was speaking to a group of students talking about carbohydrates or something related to nutrition and work for Hills. And at the end, invariably, any of you who've ever gone to guest speak at a school and you're talking about something, anything related to sort of husbandry, people always want to come up and show you pictures of their dogs. I've seen billions of pictures of students' dogs. But there was a line of students waiting to talk to me about what they're feeding their animals. And there was an African-American student at the end of the line, and she's kind of animated, she's bouncing back and forth and she's on her phone. And as she gets up to me, I hear her go, "Oh my gosh, Mom, and this lady came to talk to us about dog and cat food, and she's Black," right? And I remember thinking, that's odd, but whatever, I'm gonna talk to this student. And so she goes off. It wasn't until later that evening that I couldn't quite understand why that conversation happened or why that exchange happened. But it occurred to me that I was at a vet tech program in a major US city in downtown Pittsburgh, and she was the only African-American student in that class. There were about 60 or so students in that class. So the experience of when you're the singularity, whether you're in Pittsburgh or you're in Omaha, Nebraska, regardless of where you are, there's a unique experience that you have when you are the diversity, when you are the singularity. Oftentimes, and I can speak from personal experience, there's sort of this mental, game of tennis going on. When things happen, when people say things, you spend an inordinate amount of time trying to understand what exactly did they mean by that, or what exactly did they say. So instead of sort of having your mind fully focused on the academic learning or the classroom learning or the experience, you spend a lot of time trying to understand what exactly the subcontext of that was. And so it takes away from you. When you are, oftentimes you're singled out, right? I've been in situations both in veterinary medicine and before veterinary medicine when I worked in Wall Street, where I was asked, what do Black people think about this? And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what this Black person thinks about it, because I don't know every Black person. But oftentimes you become the unwilling representative of a group. And it's a tremendous amount of pressure. There's a sense oftentimes that people don't, not that they don't understand you, but they don't understand what's underneath. They don't understand why you feel the way you feel because you're not part of the majority. So all these things have an impact not only on their experiences, their sort of life in veterinary medicine, but specifically on their ability to learn, because you're spending an inordinate amount of time doing that. I just talked about the trends on that mega survey of incremental increases in certain ethnic groups in veterinary medicine or veterinary technician education. And we can celebrate those statistics. We have, 0.5 more Native Americans. We have 2% more people who identify as Latinx. And one of the challenges is that when you are the sole individual of that group in a class setting, in a veterinary practice, we're so busy celebrating those statistical gains that we completely forget that individual who is that person of the only one of their group, they don't escape the challenges of being the only one. So we can sometimes lose sight of the individual experience of that person. She may be the only female on a research team. He may be the only LGBTQ person in a room of students who are not LGBTQ. It doesn't matter. Those statistical gains don't really matter when that individual experience is still negative for the student. There's a sense of invalidation that, it comes externally, but it also comes internally too, where it's like, they don't really get me. I don't feel like I fit in here. I have a friend who was a former faculty member, she's since retired, who reached out to me she had an African-American student, and I think she was the only one in her program. And she said to me, can you mentor her? Because she doesn't feel like she belongs here. And I said, well, help me understand, how she feels this way. So obviously, there's some obvious things like, everybody gets together and she's not included, or those sorts of obvious things. But it can be something as seemingly innocuous as, when I go to the CVS, they don't have hair care products for me. So it's little subtle messages that say, you don't belong here, those sorts of things. And then, of course, nobody gets out of veterinary medicine unscathed, right? This is a profession with real challenges, not just DEI issues, but also mental health and well-being issues, all sorts of things like that. No one gets to escape that, whether you're Black, white, Asian, gay, straight, whatever, it doesn't matter. But on top of all those, people from underrepresented groups have their own set of unique stressors. So the notion that you're not part of a community where what is understood doesn't have to be explained. That sense of never quite fully fitting in, even though people say, oh, you're my friend, never quite fully fitting in. So these are some of the life, the way these sort of challenges play out in real life experiences. I met with a student at a school in New York State. I'll just say that, right? She's a wonderful student, second year. And she told me the story. I will not forget this as long as I live, because every time I think about it, I just want to cry and punch a wall. But she was on her internship in a part of New York where she was in an urban area. So it wasn't like, rural upstate New York or whatever. And a veterinarian, when your students are on their internships, they're deer in headlights type thing. A veterinarian who she worked under said to her, she had brought lunch that day and she was eating fried chicken for lunch. And he asked her if she was having watermelon for dessert. And so when it's so blatant and so obvious, this student is going to carry that with her. She can't just have the internship experience where she learned, outstanding catheter placement types of things. She learned pulse oximetry, all those things. She now has to carry that with her too. So these are unique experiences of people from underrepresented groups. And that's why we have VTIDES. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Peg to walk through the application. Well, let me just back up for a second. When we developed this program, this is a joint venture between Zoetis and Rare Breed Veterinary Partners. Both organizations have a firm commitment to advancing inclusivity for multiple groups. And so this was born out of that. When we thought about who best to partner with to administer this, it was a natural fit for AVTE. So, you know, this is how we go through, this is how we are administering this. We're going to go through how you can go about applying for it. And then we're going to talk on the backside about some of the ways you can put this to action. We've explained what challenges are, we've explained what the need is, and we're going to talk about how to apply for this, and then how your students, how you can encourage your students and your faculty to take advantage of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Garnetta. So I'm not going to go through all my experiences that are similar to Garnetta's with students who've experienced the same sort of subtle or not so subtle isolation, but I have a Black son who experienced growing up in a all white community. So we experienced this every day, and that's actually how I connected with Garnetta, was after she did a keynote at AVTE, and I think it was 2018?
19.
Yeah.
Nolans.
Yeah, Nolans. Yeah. And my son was there with us to look at the Louisiana State University. And I was so concerned that his driving purpose for that was because that's where he came from. He was born in Louisiana, and his birth family is there. And I was really struggling with this idea that he never felt like he belonged. The word belonging in the VTIDESb for me is super important, because that's really what this is about making students feel like they belong. So your retention numbers for everybody, even in those underrepresented groups, stays high, that we recognize them, we see them, and we treat them like they belong. And Garnetta was so kind to me when I sort of lost my stuff after her presentation and went up to her saying, oh my God, this is my life right now. But anyway, we're very grateful for AVTE for hosting this initiative for us. The applications are on their website. They're really short and easy to complete. You're really only looking to put on there the program information, including the club advisor. And then what is your plan? What is the activity that you've developed and want to host with the money that will provide? The grants range up to $500. And the events really do, though, need to demonstrate that you will, that it includes or brings together, shows how communities can be built that are supportive for underrepresented groups. And other than that, I mean, that's really what it is. You're going to describe the event that you want to host and say how it meets the initiatives of the program. Right, so your program advisor, I am hearing from, and this is kind of an interesting dilemma, I am hearing from some programs that don't have active club groups, mostly post-COVID. Some of them are really struggling. I don't know if that represents any of you. Maybe we can talk about that in the Q&A and how we can address that. We don't want to leave programs out because you're struggling with that. But at any rate, we need somebody who's going to be the advisor, the student club president, and contact information.
Yep.
And then this description of the planned event or activity and how it will satisfy the state admission of VTIDES, and your date and number of participants.
Yep.
Awesome.
So honestly, it should take very little time, if you know, not very much time at all. Once the application is submitted, then it's reviewed by a committee at AVTE. The decisions are made, grants are dispersed, the event is executed, and then you report back, and AVTE will develop the reporting structure. You report back the metrics of your activity, how many people attended or were impacted, you know, if it was a community type thing, you know, how many people attended, that sort of thing, and any other important findings. And these are really important because for us, you know, as the funders of this, or sponsors of this, it gives us an opportunity to see how effective those dollars were at reaching our goal, one. But it also allows us to advocate for additional dollars for the following year so that we can expand this as much as possible. And overall, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about some examples of activities. We want to know that the intended outcome met the objective. That, you know, if your goal was to, you know, provide, I don't know, a community event in an underrepresented community about basic dental care, or, you know, how to feed your animal, or something simple. But only 2 people showed up, then we have to figure out, you know, where did we go wrong, or what could we have done better? But also, if our goal was to give exposure to a community who doesn't typically have a lot of exposure to veterinary medicine, and we were able to do this, then it shows that we were able to meet the target on that. So VTIDES is really sort of was heavily influenced by an existing program in veterinary colleges. And this is why when I was talking before about, this not being just another thing for faculty to do, this is something where students take the rein and they can run with this. So the program is called VOICE. And again, with the acronyms, it stands for Veterinarians as One Inclusive Community of Empowerment. And VOICE is administered through the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges. And each of the colleges of veterinary medicine that has a VOICE chapter gets funding from AAVMC to put on activities. And these are all designed, again, in the realm of, I pet my cat just a second ago, and there's cat hair flying everywhere, I apologize. These are all designed in the realm of being able to expand inclusivity in the community where those students are serving. So inclusivity in, say, University of Minnesota is going to look vastly different than it would, say, in Arizona, University of Arizona, primarily because there are different communities there, right? There's a large Hmong community in Minnesota, and there are native tribes in Arizona, and so the outreach is going to look different. So again, to Peg's point before about, diversity is not just limited to sort of cultural and regional diversity. It's things like, neurodiversity. So an ASL or a workshop, or something related to how you navigate your learning challenges. It can be microaggressions presentation. Again, service to tribal communities. If the school is located in an area with large tribal communities, this would be something that would be appropriate for them. So again, the challenge is to look around you, to look not just at your program, but also to look at the larger community and how you can affect an impact there. Peg went through the applications that have been submitted already. And I think this is a really important point to learn from some of some of the planned activities that really do hit the mark, and some of the planned activities that may need to be tweaked a little bit because understanding of what DEI isn't quite fully appreciated. So Peg, I'll leave it to you to go over some of the submissions.
Right. We did see a couple of applications that need a little bit of work, but one of the things I do want to say is Todd and the board have been doing a really great job of reaching back out to applicants that have events planned that maybe don't quite hit the mark, so that we can kind of help you move the goal posts a little bit to get to where we want to be. But some of the amazing things, and I don't know if Tammy is on this call, but Wilson College has done a lot of great things well before VTIDES came along, and they have a really spectacular application out there, so she'd be a great person to reach out to. And one of the things they've done a really good job of is associating, collaborating with other college affinity groups, so to work together, and it makes it a really easy lift. If you have an LGBTQ plus group on campus and you want to get together to host an event, it really does sort of make it an easy lift to plan events that are going to help broaden the understanding. One of the biggest questions I get when I approach a group of students and faculty is, we don't understand pronouns. We don't even know how to talk about pronouns. And those groups can really help you do that, so that you don't have to do that lifting. You get together and host the event, and you can have somebody provide that presentation, maybe over a cultural dining event. And those are also, I think that's listed on here, but those are really great opportunities. One that I saw is connecting to Upward Bound. Upward Bound is a program that does work a lot inherently with underrepresented groups. So what a great way right there to just connect with a group that you need to connect with. Another one was working with celebrating and connecting people with mentors. And that is valuable well beyond the event that you host. That will really provide an ongoing relationship for those students that will help them be successful. Another one that I saw talked about a community event that adds the J to DEIB, the justice piece, which is another part that's super important. And then doing some of the research beyond what we're already seeing, that you can do cultural fairs, storytelling events. When I've been at programs and I tell my own son's story, it generally will lead to students being willing to stand up and share some really powerful experiences of their own. And that can change the whole dynamic in the club or amongst that group of students in terms of how they understand and what they want to do to make that student feel more comfortable. Presentations on unconscious bias, pronouns, microaggressions. There are lots of groups out there in the veterinary space already that can help you do these things. If you don't already know what your resources are, please feel free to reach out. Pride VMC is amazing. They will give you all kinds of resources. And then I have reached out to Melody Martinez, who is the president of the Multicultural Vet Med Association, and I think she will be able to give us some resources as well. And I've already mentioned, excuse me, that the NAVTES DEI committee is doing a lot of work, and they may be able to provide you with some resources as well.
So there was a question, oh, and I also want to add to that mix Plausibilities Vet Med, which is mentoring, does tremendous work. Not only they do it inter profession as well as extra professional, from inside the profession and from outside the profession. There was a question in the chat that I want to address, but before I address that, one of the things that I thought is important to point out is Peg just gave a great examples of some really innovative plans or proposals that some of the colleges are looking, or some of the programs are looking to execute. And those are all great. We did receive some that were sort of, they need to be tweaked. So, without saying, it was wrong, but the grant is not intended to sort of fund activities that don't have a direct DEI component. So if you're applying to the grants that you can take your students to a wildlife preserve to underwrite, a trip to a wildlife preserve, there's no DEI there. If you're writing a grant to say, there's a school in your community with lots of a high student population of underrepresented members, and you wanted to go and do a day of, do a presentation on a day in the life of a vet tech, and your students were spearheading that would be a great use of it, because what you're doing is you're giving exposure to people who otherwise might not have exposure to careers in veterinary medicine. But there was a question from one of the attendees about, I clicked the wrong button, about how to execute some of these things. She works in at a vet company under L&D. And one of the most effective tools I want to share with you is Journey for Teams from AVMA. And I happen to bring what are these called again? Thumb balls, right?
Thumb balls.
Thumb balls, right, exactly. So they give them away, AVMA, you can reach out to AVMA and get them. But it's designed as a team building thing to start to help you flesh out a better understanding of what DEI is. So you toss it to each other, whatever. I'm sure everyone here has done a thumb ball, but it's like all these questions, how do you respond to jokes that are demeaning or derogatory, right? Another one says, describe an instance where someone went out of their way to help you feel included. What signs have you seen that indicate someone is growing more accepting of diversity? So these are ways to open up the discussion. And honestly, I think if you had a session with your students and you guys are tossing this around to as part of your ideation process, your students, I'm pretty confident, will come up with some great ideas for how to execute this. So it's Journey for Teams. I don't have the website here, but it's under AVMA. If you go to AVMA, Journey for Teams is a really good resource there. So Danielle, your question about executing this in practice in L&D, I think that would be a great resource for you because you're not in an academic setting, but for the academicians here, I think it's also beneficial. Okay. So where is the thing? There we go. Okay, so this is the Let's Talk portion, and I guess we turn it over to Todd.
Coming. Here we are. Give me just a second. That spotlight. All right, friends. This is a wonderful chance. If you have questions, thoughts, reactions, anything you would like to bring it to the table and make sure you walk away with maybe a little more insight on, we can use the chat. You can take your mute. It's mute. Take your mute off and just jump in, whatever works. I'm just getting this back to Brady Bunch real quick. Give me a second. You don't need to hang with me. There we go. Anybody have anything you'd like to jump in with? Well, then I will, while you all are pondering, because I know you are. I did get asked beforehand from somebody who couldn't be here today if you could help the schools who haven't quite yet got their accreditation but want to meet the standard, knowing that, you know, folks can be pretty thorough in reviewing programs' commitments to this before, during, and after all of that fun?
Good question. In fact, we were just talking about this. The grants itself, I think, are limited to accredited programs, but I know Garnetta and I'll speak for myself, super happy to work with anybody to help you develop some initial programming that won't cost you anything. There are things you can do that won't cost you a dime. I do a lot of traveling, I visit a lot of programs, and I talk on this subject. And even those events can be helpful in saying we're on this journey to start addressing this. I did not know about thumb balls. I'll say that. This is new to me. So I just reached out to Journey for Teams, and I'm hoping to get those so that when I go visit programs, I can leave one with you so that you can start those conversations with your students. I find that when you start these conversations with students, the students will take this on. And that makes it much easier for program directors and instructors who are already overwhelmed. But yeah, happy to help you get there. But I think the grants at this point are limited to accredited programs.
The other thing to Peg's point is, you know, starting that conversations with students, it's amazing. You'd be surprised how far that goes to increasing a sense of belonging, that you cared enough to want to do something like this, that you cared enough to even bring this up with them. That says, I see you. I see you, and I see that you're different and your walk may be different, and I want to help with that. And so, you know, to Peg's point about opening the conversation with students and then, whoo, brace yourself because they're going to take you some places. I'm preaching to the choir. You guys know, students tell me things and I'm like, wait, what? This is new. So just having that conversation, I think, is the first step. But, you know, being able to execute these, they really don't take a lot of money. But, you know, for those programs that are still awaiting accreditation, to Peg's point, you know, we reach out to vet tech programs across the country.
We'll get you started. If you want to do it, we'll get you started. And to Garnetta's point, students will tell you a lot of things. I've been teaching for a really long time, but these conversations are different. When I go to programs and start them, I'll usually tell my son's story, whether he wants me to or not. And then what it opens up and the stories I hear, it is emotional, and it is emotional for everybody in the room. And I will say, even at Rare Breed went through the Blend program, which is a DEI, primarily Black and Brown support group for veterinary practices to learn about being more culturally friendly. And when I told his story at that group, I got messages as I was sitting there, text messages from people who were sitting in the room saying, I would come talk to you, but I'm crying and I will talk to you later. I had no idea. And I'm on a school board right now, and I share my stories with Garnetta. I'm in a very conservative town, and school board meetings are horrible. And I feel so bad for anybody who is sitting in that room of any underrepresented group, because they do not feel welcome. And if they are given the space to tell their story, it is very helpful for people in that room who've never dealt with, been exposed to really learn about how their actions impact other people.
Yeah. I was doing a presentation. I just put someone asked for our email address. I just put them in the chat. I was doing a presentation for one of the veterinary specialty groups, one of the colleges, the veterinary specialty groups. And this presentation was on microaggressions. And there was a woman who was of Middle Eastern descent. She had an accent. I'm not sure what country. At the time, I didn't know what country. And there was a man he was Caucasian, only from what I could see. He was Caucasian and tall. That's what I could see. And we started talking about, the woman stood up and she asked a question. And I forget what her question was, but the nature of it was, how do you deal with, you know, people who look down upon me because I'm from another country. I'm from another country. And the man stood up and he said, I'm from another country too. I'm from Canada. And he had a French Canadian accent. And I said to him, I said, when she said she's from Iran, all she had to say was she was Iranian or she's from Iran. And then there's an entire paradigm of judgment and, you know, sort of values that are put on her. She's female. She's olive toned, and she's from a country that the United States has a contentious relationship with. you are from Canada. And until you opened your mouth, I didn't know that you were from Canada. And Canada is a country that the United States has a great relationship with. So he was explaining, I should feel discriminated against too, because, I'm a foreigner and I have, I'm not from this country and I'm French Canadian. And so sometimes I think even when people are trying to understand the notion of inclusivity, it gets lost because they're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm from another country and I'm not discriminated against. Without him having said anything, just on looks alone, there's a whole layer of judgments and values that are placed. And so when I say that to illustrate the fact that Peg and I may be talking about this, we may have put this program together, we may have laid out information that's useful to you, but I guarantee you before the day is over, we're each going to be challenged to learn something new. We're each going to learn something that we didn't know before. So the point of this is that even as you're executing these programs, you're going to learn, you're going to grow with your students. Your understanding of inclusivity is going to grow as well. So it really is one of those situations, one of those, this is really an opportunity for everyone involved to grow. We can't really teach something that we don't fully appreciate ourselves. We don't fully understand ourselves.
There we go. We did have someone ask, how about thoughts on programs who don't have a student club, and is there anything in particular you think they ought to be sharing in the sampling of past activities and whatnot? How do they overcome that perceived challenge to the grant, to receiving a grant? No history. They're starting off.
So I can speak a bit to that, and Garnett, I'm sure you can too, but I already have some presentations scheduled at some colleges that are struggling with their vet tech clubs and don't have one. In that case, I usually go and speak to whatever group they can pull together. Sometimes it's a group of seniors, sometimes it's both groups. If it's a 4-year class, they'll do it at a time when they think they're going to get the most number of people there. And we can get you going that way. And we can find that it's not always about money. I mean, once you get your club going, or if you want to host an event, we can help you pull that together, find an advisor or a student who wants to take it on. And we want to make that work. So please reach out and we'll figure out a way to get you started.
Yeah,
And even,
and that goes for us too. We will
Yeah.
do anything we can to help the cause here. You got
Yeah.
a third partner in that.
I mean, I think the way it's been presented is that it's sort of a club-based exercise or a club-based initiative, but absent a formal club, you still can absolutely do it. It could be the vet tech program at XXX college, whatever, that puts this on. It doesn't have to be a formal
Yeah,
program.
I think one
It
of the
makes it a little easier if it is, but
I think one of the underlying points Peg was making early on was, we're going to call you. You got a question, you worry, just call. The goal is to help you get to a good place where this grant is a synergistic with some good things happening. So this isn't, we're not looking to have a rejection rate. If we can't do it, it kind of bums the heck out of us that it's not a fit.
Well, and I think student clubs can be challenging to get started because students can't think of things to do sometimes. They just are busy students. They're as busy as you are. Many of them, they have jobs. And if we can help them by saying, hey, look, come together, I'll give you an idea, and we'll actually also help you find the funding to do it. Sometimes that's enough, particularly if you have addressed an issue or a concept that they really feel that they have vested interest in. It may be enough to get a club going. And that's a big win. That's a double win.
Here's a second program on top of what you could get for the grant from as part of the VTIDESb program. We have board members who would be more than happy to join your student club for a bit of a Kahoot online quizzo type thing. And after they lose to your club, we have a collection of t-shirts that says, I took on a AVTE board member and I'm smarter than them, that we'll send to everybody.
That's
and
awesome.
I'll buy you the pizza for that day. I'll take care of the food. I'll take care of the program. I'll do all of it. It's ready to go and we'll help. Yeah, Trish, we're putting you out next. Jen lost last time. Then it's Rebecca.
I think Jen got voluntold, or Trish got voluntold.
No, she's in the chat. She talked, so she got in trouble.
There was another thing that I wanted to talk about was the idea that with this being the year that it really sort of gets off the ground, of presenting some success stories at the AVTE convention or AVTE symposium in July, is it? I think it's July this year. Because this last year was the second year that Peg and I talked about this. This is the first time that it's actually people are applying and we are getting activities scheduled and whatnot. We would absolutely love to showcase some of the activities, you know, have some of you present what you actually did, how you leveraged this particular program. This really does come down to sort of an each one teach one type thing, because just looking at some of the questions in the chat, it's like, well, how do I? But if you have the ability to hear your peers say, well, what we did at our school was X, Y, and Z, and you find common areas to address, you know, it really just sort of builds upon itself. So I know we would be looking to, you know, I know the call for proposals or abstracts hasn't gone out yet, but I think this will be a great opportunity to showcase peer-to-peer learning.
We'll
among
talk. I
educators.
know people.
I know people too.
Yeah. And I have the password to the submission system.
Yeah.
Another one that just came in, and we probably have time for one or two more to be respectful of everybody's time and whatnot. I missed the part related to the grants. Are those to help with the outreach events or incorporating this program within our program?
It's designed to underwrite the actual event. So yeah, so if you're putting together, I don't know, a community event and you're providing cookies or something, or you're providing materials that you can pass out to individuals, the grant dollars are to be used specifically for that. There's actually an accounting of those grant dollars when you do your reporting. We want to know exactly how those dollars were spent.
So they might be used for food. We have one group that's using them for T-shirts for a parade they're going to host. I mean, there's some really creative ideas out there.
Yeah.
A lot of different things. A lot of different things. We are about at the top of the hour. If anybody else has a quick, we can make that work. The beauty is the chat is there. You know how to find Peg. You know how to find Garnetta. You know how to find us. All of us are certainly ready, willing, and excited to be of assistance. If you're doing the application and you're a little befuddled, or if the tech is not playing nice, let me know. We're gonna make this work. This is a community effort to make good things happen. And I think that's a big underlying part of it. And yet another piece is we kind of take the next 6 months talking about what is teaching excellence. And it's not always in the classroom, and it's not always tied to a board thing. So it's just another big piece of the puzzle, what makes this community special, and it's a treat to tell the story. Any last words, Peg Garnetta or Jen Serling's dog?
I'll just say that I'm happy to do virtual presentations if you have a student club that you want us to talk specifically about this with them, with a club president, help them get started, reach out. I can do virtual. Some of them I do in person. If you're close enough, I'm happy to do a bit of traveling to get to you.
That's the exact same for me. That I put our email addresses in the chat. So feel free to reach out. I see a couple of names of faculty member whose students I've spoken to before in the past. And so happy to, if I can physically be there, absolutely will be, but otherwise we have the Zoom. So for sure.
Sounds good. And what will happen is we're going to take this tape. We're going to get this tape out to you probably very early next week, as quickly as we can. You can do one thing for the cause between now and then. Think of somebody in your sphere of influence that you know that would be a great fit, the kind of person who would get real excited over this program, and make a plan when you get the email with the link to this recording to share it with one person. If we all do that, this is going to take off.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Peg. Thank you, Garnetta.
Thank you. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, guys.